Hello friends, today is January 13th, 2026, and you are watching another detailed overview of the combat operations map. At the current moment, a large volume of updated information is coming in from almost the entire line of contact. Changes are being recorded simultaneously in several directions, and in certain sectors, truly significant developments are unfolding. Particular attention today is focused on the Kupiansk direction, where an operational encirclement is gradually forming for Ukrainian armed forces units, effectively a cauldron. I would also like to draw your attention to one important point. I have noticed that around 70% of viewers who regularly watch these reports are still not subscribed to the channel. If it is not difficult for you, please click the subscribe button. This simple action will significantly help the development of the channel and allow the continued release of analytical materials of this kind. Speaking in general about the current dynamics, the Russian army has now reached a pace of combat operations at which the liberation of settlements is occurring almost on a daily basis. In some cases, several settlements are taken under control within a short period of time. This time, information has been confirmed regarding the capture of a village in the Zaporizhzhia region, located within the area of responsibility of the Dnipro troop grouping on the Zaporizhzhia axis. Units of the Dnipro grouping managed to advance approximately 1 kilometer and 700 meters deep into the enemy's defensive lines. Moreover, this was not a localized breakthrough, but an advance along a fairly wide section of the front. The width of the advance zone amounted to nearly 5 kilometers. As a result of these actions, the small village of Novoboykovsky was taken under control. This settlement itself is indeed very small. In practice, it consists of just one street, and prior to the outbreak of hostilities, only about 30 people lived there. Nevertheless, given that the density of settlements in this sector of the front is extremely low, control over any one of them provides a serious tactical advantage to the side that occupies it. At this stage, the vector of further advance is becoming increasingly clear. Following the capture of Novoboykovsky, the direction of the offensive is now clearly defined. Movement is developing northward toward Kamyshevaka. Kamyshevaka is already an urban-type settlement and one of the key logistical hubs of the armed forces of Ukraine in this sector. Before the conflict began, its population stood at approximately 6,000 people. From the current positions of Russian forces, the distance to Kamyshevaka is just over 7 kilometers. At the same time, if one looks at the map, it becomes obvious that there are no settlements located along this entire stretch between the current positions and the town. In effect, this is open terrain. Settlements are positioned only on the flanks, Magdalinivka and a small auxiliary settlement. And that is essentially all. As a result, the route toward Kamyshevaka is practically open. What would the advance of Russian units to Kamyshevaka mean? It would result in the severing of the main supply artery for Orikhiv, the H08 highway connecting Zaporizhzhia and Orikhiv. Yes, the Ukrainian side would still retain an alternative supply route through Novomykolaivka and further along the Omelnik-Orikhiv direction. However, it is precisely toward this axis that the Vostok troop grouping is already advancing. Thus, before our eyes, a classic envelopment scheme is taking shape, two pincers. From the west, the Dnipro grouping is advancing, while from the east, the Vostok grouping is operating. The culmination of these actions should be their junction and the complete encirclement of Orikhiv along with the Ukrainian garrison stationed there, provided, of course, that this garrison does not manage to withdraw from the city in advance. At the same time, it is important to note that the advance toward Kamyshevaka is not the only vector of activity in this sector. Combat operations are continuing for Novoyakivlivka. After resistance in this settlement is fully suppressed, further movement is likely to develop not northward, but eastward, toward Yurkivka. Overall, it can be stated that directions where progress had been extremely difficult and very limited as recently as summer have now noticeably come to life. We are observing a steady retreat of Ukrainian armed forces units and conversely a gradual and consistent advance by the Russian army. Now let us move on to the Huliaipol direction. As of today, small but important changes have been recorded here. They concern the western part of Huliaipol and the corresponding section of the line of contact. A number of pro-Ukrainian sources claim that Russian forces are allegedly unable to hold Kupiansk, that Ukrainian units are conducting daily counterattacks and pushing Russian troops back. However, this information does not correspond to reality. Pro-Ukrainian resources traditionally report exclusively on their own successes, while completely ignoring information about their losses. In reality, the situation looks different. Russian forces are not only holding Kupiansk, but are also expanding their zone of control to the west of the town. Strikes are being carried out against Ukrainian positions in the areas of the settlements of Zheleznychne and Starokrenka. In addition, the settlement of Sviatopetrivka has effectively come under full Russian control. Confirming information has already been received from this section of the line of contact. All territory currently marked in red is fully controlled by Russian forces. There are also changes north of Kupiansk. A previously formed pocket in this area is gradually being cleared. Let me remind you that earlier, a mechanized assault was attempted in this sector, with a column advancing toward the settlements of Rivnopilia and Sladke, but it was destroyed. After that, the area was temporarily marked in favor of the Ukrainian side, since Russian forces did not control it. Now the reverse process is underway. The line of control is shifting in favor of the Russian army. Units of the Russian armed forces are methodically clearing these areas and simultaneously expanding their zone of control north of the settlement of Pryutne. Let us move on to the Pokrovsk direction. Here, news reports are primarily coming in, along with minor changes recorded directly within Pokrovsk itself. The main focus at present is on the settlements of Novopodhorodne, Novo-Oleksandrivka, and Serhivka. Russian forces continue to strike Ukrainian positions in all three of these settlements. In addition, the zone of control north of Udakny is expanding. The day before, video footage was obtained from a specific point, and all territory marked in red subsequently came under full Russian control. As of today, reports indicate further expansion of the control zone, although the exact scale remains unclear, as this sector includes a buffer zone with a large number of grey areas. I would like to remind you that the front line shown on the map represents only a conditional boundary. Neither Ukrainian nor Russian units are positioned strictly along this line. There exists a grey zone where forward positions of both sides are located. Changes have also been recorded north of Pokrovsk. It was from this location that video footage was obtained, confirming the presence of forward Russian positions. All territory marked in red is currently under full control of the Russian armed forces. It is reported that the Ukrainian armed forces are concentrating reserves between the settlements of Hryshyn and Rodinska. In the open fields between them, forces are being amassed that periodically strike Russian positions on the approaches to Hryshyn, within Pokrovsk and in the Rodinska area. At times, attempts are made to conduct assault actions by small groups, but all such attempts are eliminated on the approaches to Pokrovsk, which is firmly held by Russian units. Rodinsky also remains under Russian control. Russian forces continue to strike concentrations of enemy manpower. Information is also coming in regarding fierce fighting on the approaches to Hryshyn, particularly on its southwestern outskirts. Ukrainian units continue to hold this settlement. No less intense fighting is taking place west of Rodinske, where Russian forces are attempting to break through Ukrainian defenses, but without significant success so far. We move on further. Novoboykovsky is not the only settlement that has come under Russian control over the past 24 hours. Finally, the months-long episode surrounding the village of Shakov has come to an end. This settlement has come under full and stable Russian control. Formerly, Ukrainian armed forces units were pushed out of the village back in December, but for a long time Shakov remained a grey zone. Neither side was able to establish a firm foothold there. Only now, following advances further north, even though this movement has not yet been reflected on the map, have Russian fighters already entered Toretsk. This made it possible to finally clear Shakov completely and secure positions there. The Ukrainian defensive node in this sector proved to be extremely complex and was captured by Russian forces only with great difficulty. Those who regularly follow these reports will remember very well that in order to break through Ukrainian defenses in this area, it was repeatedly necessary to employ powerful mechanized assaults. The fighting was prolonged, extremely intense, and bloody. Nevertheless, the final outcome turned out to be in favor of the Russian army. What can be expected next? At the present moment, the key battles are unfolding for Toretsk. It is precisely this settlement that represents the final element in the Ukrainian armed forces' defensive system in this sector. The entire defensive configuration here was built around three settlements: Shakov, Sofievka, and Toretsk. Shakov and Sofievka are already under the control of Russian forces. All that remains is to press and secure Toretsk. After that, the road will open toward Torske, followed by Raiske, and beyond that lies Druzhkivka. Moreover, the issue is not limited to Druzhkivka alone. The developing envelopment will be so extensive that the entirety of Kostiantynivka will be at risk of encirclement. Incidentally, this is precisely the scenario that constitutes the key objective of the Russian side. The main idea is to avoid prolonged and extremely exhausting street battles directly for Kostiantynivka, and instead to bypass the city along the flanks, placing it into a semi-encirclement. In this scheme, settlements such as Torske and Raiske play an important role on one side, while Verolyubivka and Kutivka play a similar role on the other. However, the situation here is far from as straightforward as it might appear at first glance. Despite the fact that this sector was marked in red on the map, according to the latest information, Russian units failed to establish a firm hold in Verolyubivka. At present, this settlement is in a grey zone, meaning it is effectively controlled by neither Russian forces nor units of the Ukrainian armed forces. At the same time, intense fighting continues around Kostiantynivka itself. Battles are ongoing for Novodmitrivka, Ilinivka, and Berestovka. This information is confirmed, among other sources, by Ukrainian reports as well. It must be acknowledged that the situation in this sector remains extremely tense and difficult. Ukrainian units are putting up fierce resistance, actively counter-attacking, and at this stage Russian forces do not yet have firm and stable control over the listed settlements. Nevertheless, Russian units continue systematic attempts to break through Ukrainian defenses, with the aim of subsequently collapsing the entire defensive configuration around Kostiantynivka and depriving the Ukrainian side of the ability to hold this area. From the Krasny-Lyman direction, particularly important reports are coming in, affecting several settlements at once: Lyman, Karpivka, Korovyi Yar, and Oleksandrivka. Let us begin with Lyman. According to available information, Russian diversionary and reconnaissance groups are operating in the eastern part of the city, penetrating quite deeply into the urban area. Reports also indicate entries by Russian units from the southeastern direction. It cannot be ruled out that serious changes may occur in this sector in the near future. Previously received information from this direction has repeatedly been confirmed. Russian forces are consistently expanding their zone of control. The main supply road has effectively been cut off and is under physical control of Russian forces. However, it should be recalled that the Ukrainian side had largely ceased using this route earlier, as all bridges and crossings over the Siversky Donets River in this area had been destroyed. In addition, supply routes have also been severed from the direction of the settlement of Yarova. As a result, Ukrainian logistics in Lyman are blocked from both sides. In the long term, this may lead to the loss of control over the city. However, it must be understood that this is not a matter of the coming days. Such a process may take several weeks. In the areas of Drobyshev and Stavki, active combat operations are continuing, but at present they are not accompanied by significant territorial advances. An additional black shading has also been applied on the map in the area of the settlement of Yarova. At the same time, Russian forces continue to exert pressure in the areas of Sviatohirsk, Tetyanivka, and Sosnov. Following the capture of Red Kodub, reports indicate that Russian units are attempting to push Ukrainian forces out of the settlement of Karpivka. At present, Karpivka is approximately half under the control of Russian forces. Pressure is also continuing in the directions of Korovyi Yar and Oleksandrivka. It should be taken into account that this area lies directly along the administrative border between the Kharkiv and Donetsk regions. At present, the Russian side is laying claim to control over this entire territory. Looking ahead, this includes potential actions in the areas of Karpivka, Vovchi Yar, Korovyi Yar, Lozova, Rubtsi, and Oleksandrivka. Overall, the front line in this sector has noticeably intensified. At the same time, the key factor remains the settlement of Borova. If Russian forces manage to cut supply routes and advance toward Borova, logistics will be completely disrupted for the entire Ukrainian armed forces grouping in this sector. So far, no advances have been recorded here. Moreover, there are reports of Ukrainian counterattacks in this area. From the Kupiansk direction, both confirmed and unconfirmed information continues to arrive, marked in grey on the map. There are reports of further expansion of the zone of control in favor of the Russian army. The day before, materials were received confirming Russian advances in this sector, as well as in the eastern part of Kupiansk itself. The overall picture indicates the formation of an operational encirclement in the area of the settlements of Petropavlivka and Kucherivka. Ukrainian units here have effectively been deprived of stable supply and most likely will be unable to withdraw from this area, as a large number of FPV drone teams are operating actively. There are also reports of Russian forces expanding their zone of control in the direction of Kupiansk-Uzlovy. Let me remind you that earlier, Russian units had been pushed back from this sector to the settlement of Pishchane, after which they resumed pressure and regained lost territory. At present, Russian forces have been tasked with taking Kupiansk under full control by any means before the end of the winter period. At the same time, video footage was recently obtained from the central part of Kupiansk, showing Ukrainian servicemen freely moving through the city with national flags. This allows us to conclude that Russian units are still located at a considerable distance from the city center. We are awaiting additional information to clarify the situation. This concludes the overview of the situation along the front line. If we summarize the overall results of the past 24 hours, 2 settlements and approximately 9 square kilometers of territory have come under Russian control. During the same period, Ukrainian armed forces units did not advance in any direction. On the night of January 13th, another missile strike was carried out against Ukrainian territory. The primary targets, once again, were energy infrastructure facilities. Judging by the systematic strikes on such targets over several consecutive nights in Kyiv, the Dnipropetrovsk region, and the Odessa area, the Russian command has made a strategic decision to consistently disable key industrial and logistical regions under Kyiv's control. Today, the Kyiv and Kaniv hydroelectric power plants in the vicinity of the capital were struck. There are also reports of damage to the Kyiv pumped storage power plant, which is located near the Kyiv hydroelectric power plant, but constitutes a separate facility. In addition, several substations were hit again. As a result, emergency power outages once again affected not only Kyiv itself, but also new areas of the Kyiv region. For the capital and surrounding areas, such a regime has effectively become permanent. Another strike was also carried out against the Kryvyi Rih thermal power plant and energy substations in the Dnipropetrovsk region, leading to consequences similar to those observed in the Kyiv region. Separate mention should be made of strikes on Odessa. According to footage published the previous day by the Russian command, on January 9th of this year, Russian drone operators successfully attacked vessels located in the ports of the Odessa region using FPV drones. The distance from the Crimean coast to the targets reached up to 150 kilometers. This indicates active development and refinement of technologies for conducting strikes at such long ranges using so-called mother drones and signal repeaters. This technology represents significant tactical value. In addition, Ukrainian information outlets reported the previous day on alleged attacks on the waters of these ports using Russian unmanned surface vessels. Overall, it can be noted that in addition to the now familiar reports of strikes against infrastructure facilities since the beginning of 2026, more and more new elements have appeared in the character of these operations. In particular, it became known the previous day about the first use by the Russian army of inexpensive cruise missiles designated Geran 5, which also indicates a further expansion of both the arsenal and tactical capabilities.